and welcome to Narayana IAS Academy. In this session of the top topics of the week, we'll delve into 5 most important topics from the Hindu and the Indian Express. So let's explore each topic in depth so that you're well informed and prepared for the examination. So let's kick off with the first topic.
This is going to be a very easy topic. It's a very static topic also. Here is nothing but we are going to discuss about the indigenously developed Pinaka, that is the multi-barrel rocket launch system. So let us see. France evaluating India's Pinaka rocket system for its use. So in this article, we will be discussing about Pinaka's rocket system, and because other countries are going to, import from us, how is India's defense export market going to be benefited because of this is what we'll discuss. And this is important for both your prelims and the mains examination, and specifically under prelims, it comes under current events of national as well as international importance. So moving forward, there has been a previous year question with respect to PSLVs. So all this PSLVs, DSLVs and all different kinds of the rockets as well as the orbits, all these things you're supposed, you have to actually know with the exam perspective. From the exam perspective, now let us get into the article. Okay, so France is evaluating India's indigenously developed Pinaka multi-barrel rocket launch system. Let's understand the concept as usual. What is multi-barrel rocket launch system? So it is it's an artillery system. What do you mean by artillery system? Artillery system is nothing but, you have seen these kind of guns, right, from where they actually fire their targets. It can be a cannon or a gun like this, right? So this is what. So multi-barrel rocket launch system is what is that? It can actually launch multiple rockets at successive speeds over that will actually cover over a large area in a very small period of time. So that is what is called as the multiple barrel rocket launch system. So here France is actually trying to replace its current rocket system with India's rocket system. So here it is showing India's growing defense export market, and it also discusses about deepening of defense ties between us as well as France and other countries. Okay, so now moving forward, let us actually look at this Pinaka multi-barrel rocket system. Can you see there are different there are so many rockets that can be launched at the same time, over a short period of time over long distance. So what is this particular Pinaka system is what we'll actually discuss now. So here it is an indigenously developed artillery system developed by the DRDO, that is Defense Research and Development Organization. This is to support the Indian Army, which is actually capable of targeting the personnel, or whether it is an enemy equipment as well as bunkers over a wide area. The specifications is the current Pinaka 1, it actually has a range of 38 kilometers, and the Pinaka 2, which is actually under development, and the further developments of the same will actually have over 75 and 120 to 300 kilometers. So this is what is the Pinaka system. Now let us move. What are the features? It actually has high mobility. Okay, so it is actually mounted on a mobile launcher that can actually move. So this enables quick deployment and high movement or maneuverability, and also multi-launcher capability. Okay, almost 12 rockets can actually be launched in 44 seconds. That is how quick, you just imagine. Ammunition variety, it is actually capable of various ammunition. Okay, whether it is a conventional or a traditional type, or whether it is a precision guided ammunition. Next one, the operational use is that right now Indian Army has 4 regiments, okay, with 6 more on order. Next one, export success, that is Armenia became the first international buyer. Now followed by that is France. Let's see what are all the other countries which will actually potentially import from India. So now moving on, the strategic and geopolitical alignment between India and France is, so here if you see, both India and France actually have strategic interest. Okay, both of them strive for global security and peacekeeping. So they actually have their alignment with respect to that of security and geopolitics on the same lines, right? Because we are involved in exercises like Shakti, as well as we have UNIFIL. What is UNIFIL? This is United Nations Interim forces in Lebanon. Okay, so this way we actually have similar interest is what the article actually says. Now moving forward, the increasing export success, definitely when compared to that of the 2016-17 levels, now what happens, our defense exports that have actually increased like 6 times. Okay, like first Armenia was there, and now what happens, France is actually evaluating it. And also if you see top defense what to say export partners for India are United States, France, etc. Okay, so this is actually going to improve our market as well as our indigenous what to say manufacturing, so that it is going to complement our Make in India initiative. So this is what is mentioned here. It has increased in just 6 years from earlier 1,521 crore to 15,000. Systems like Pinaka is going to increase India's success in indigenous defense, as well as top defense customers include United States, France, as well as Armenia. Okay, so this is what is this article about. Now moving forward, if you see the expanded product ranges, India is not only good at manufacturing the missiles, it has others also like aircraft components. Then it actually has naval equipments and missiles, as you already know, and it has different types of artillery systems starting from guns, etc. So this is actually there, and so we actually aim to reach a target of around 35,000 crores by 2025. And also this is going to help us boost our products like so this is actually going to help us achieve what to say go milestones in our particular initiatives like Make in India policy and the defense production and export promotion policy, etc. Okay, so this is what it is all about. Now moving forward, let us actually solve a question. So the Pinaka multi-barrel system, what to say, consider the following statements regarding the Pinaka system. Okay, the first statement actually discusses it has been developed by India's DRDO, is designed to provide high volume firepower with a rapid launch capability. Yes, correct. So the first variant actually has 38 kilometers and other can reach up to 300 kilometers. Yes, since both the statements are correct, your answer will be option C.
What is the title? Counting right is the first. Now, if you see that in this particular topic, we'll be discussing about the caste census. When it comes to, prelims, question can be asked on the caste census, the legal as well as the constitution provisions, right? Now, if I talk about mains, in mains, we have this, subtopic in GS paper 2, that is social justice as well as Indian constitution. So you can mark this topic under GS paper 2, right? Under Indian constitution, features, amendments as well as social justice, welfare schemes and policies for the vulnerable sections of the society, right? Now, now, as caste census is often in the news, as many states are demanding it, there's a high chance that UPSC may ask a question on caste census, right? What is the question? This question was asked in the year, I guess, 2018. Whether National Commission for Scheduled Castes can enforce the implementation of constitutional reservation for the SCs in religious minority institution. This comes under Article 30. So, questions on castes both for prelims as well as mains, especially with respect to reservation, can be asked in the examination, right? Now, what is the context? Now, the state of Telangana has recently announced a caste census, right? Which means soon they will undertake caste census, right? What is the term? Caste census, caste survey or caste census, which means in this census they will be gathering data, of the backward classes or the castes that are backward. So here what is the purpose? To gather the data of the backward classes, that is the poor castes. Purpose? What is the purpose? The purpose is to identify the backward classes and give them reservation. Enhance reservation. This is what the Congress government in Telangana had promised during the election. Now they have to implement it, right? But such caste census or demand for caste census is growing in almost every state now. There's a growing demand for caste census in our country. But can the states give reservation more than 50%? Why? Because the Supreme Court had said that reservation cannot exceed 50%. Right? So, can the states surpass this judicial interpretation? Let us see. In case you are not understood the context, don't worry at all. In the next few slides, we'll understand every topic or every dimension of this topic one by one in flow, in proper order, proper flow, so that you understand everything. The context is the state of Telangana will be holding a caste census. First and foremost, what is caste census? This is what we need to understand. See, caste census is also referred to as socio-economic caste census. So, caste census or socio-economic caste census, one and the same, right? Now, in this socio-economic caste census, data about the social and economic conditions is gathered, right? Which means the people who are living in rural as well as urban India. So the data regarding the social and economic conditions of the people living in rural and urban India, this data is gathered. This is what we understand by the term socio-economic caste census, right? Now, why do the governments gather the data? What is the purpose behind gathering the data? To understand the caste distribution across the population, which means to identify the castes which are relatively socially and economically backward. The purpose is to identify the castes that are socially and economically backward. The data is collected from both rural as well as urban India, right? And what is the objective? What is the purpose behind holding caste census? One, to eliminate or to address the disparities, the challenges, the problems in the social, economical and educational sphere, in the social, educational and economic sphere. What does it mean? For example, when it comes to education, do people of particular caste or so-called backward classes have the access to education? Do they have the means to get education? When it comes to economic disparities, do people from the backward classes have the access to get government jobs? Are they in a position to get government jobs? Social, that the people who belong to so-called lower category or backward classes, they are discriminated. So to eliminate, which means to make sure that the people who are suffering from social, economic and educational disparities or problems, the government will help these people so that these people or the people belonging to backward classes can get a chance to seek education as well as get a chance to find meaningful employment. This is the purpose. Here the government wants to identify the most backward classes or most backward castes and help them. How? By giving reservation. Simple. I hope you understood what is caste-based census, the definition and the objective of caste census. Now, if I talk about the historical background, see, post-independence after 1947, we have census after every 10 years, right? Now, in every census that we had in India post-independence, the data of the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes was taken. SCs and STs. In every census, the data on SCs and STs was gathered, but the data of other backward classes was not taken. Which means only the castes who come under the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, the data was gathered, but the data about other castes or backward classes was not taken. This I am talking about India post independence. Now, before independence until 1931, up to 1931, we gather the data of each and every caste. This is up to 1931. We gathered the data of each and every caste. Now, in the census of 1941, we gathered the data of each and every caste, right? But did not publish it. So here the data was gathered but was not published. Now in India post 1947, for the first time, caste census, which means data of other castes, was also carried out in the year 2011. In the year 2011, for the first time after independence, caste census was undertaken, which means information or data about other castes was also gathered. This is the historical background, right? Now, if I talk about the existing quotas in our country, see, in our country post independence, we gave reservation to the scheduled castes. After 1947, we gave reservation to the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. Then in the 1980s, we also gave reservation to OBCs, which means as of now, we give reservation to the scheduled castes, scheduled tribes and other backward classes. Now, the Supreme Court in the year 1992, in the famous landmark judgment, Indira Sahni, it's Sahani, not Indira Gandhi, right? Indira Sahni judgment of 1992. What the Supreme Court said? That the states, the central government, state government are free to give reservation to any caste they feel are most deserving. But the reservation cannot exceed 50%. What does it mean? That, for example, in our country, the SCs get 15% reservation, the STs get 7.5% reservation, and the OBCs get 27% reservation. What is the total? So if you add, it is 49.5%. The reservation cannot exceed 50%. This is what the Supreme Court said in the year 1992 in the famous Indira Sahni judgment, right? However, despite the Supreme Court judgment, few states like Tamil Nadu, Haryana, Chhattisgarh, the reservation that they gave to other castes in these states exceeded 50%. Now, for example, political party like Congress, they said in their political manifesto, in especially Maharashtra, they said that we are going to break this 50% barrier, which means we want to give reservation more than 50%. The time has come, or there's a debate surrounding the 50% cap, whether the 50% cap should remain or should be diluted, should be revoked. I hope you understood the current reservation system. Now, what is the difference between population census and the caste census? See, SCCC or CC is one and the same. Caste census or socio-economic caste census is one and the same. What is the purpose of population census? to get the entire picture of the population. What does it mean? For example, to understand the demographic pattern. For example, literacy rate, sex ratio, housing conditions, age distribution, etc. Based on the population census, the government will understand which region of a country is backward and which region is developing or developed. Based on the population census, the government will understand the migration pattern, the urbanization level, right? So the entire picture of population is understood. When it comes to socio-economic caste census or caste census, the purpose is to understand the beneficiaries. Now the government gives subsidies, right? The government, gives free ration, free food, free education. So which category of people or which castes are eligible under the government benefits? That is the reason we undertake caste census. The purpose is to understand or to identify to identify identify beneficiaries under the government of India's, or let's say the government's schemes and policies. This is the purpose of caste census and population census. Now, this population census is carried out under the Census Act of 1948. Census Act of 1948. Under the Registrar General of India, who is a senior IAS officer, right? And this data is very confidential, which means this information cannot be accessed by public or even for that matter the government departments. It's confidential, people cannot access it. But when it comes to caste census, when it comes to confidentiality, this data, this SC data, can be accessed by the government departments, right? So this is the difference between population census and the caste census. Now, if I talk about the socio-economic caste census or caste census of 2011, as I told you, post-independence SCCC, this census was the first caste-based census, which means data regarding other castes other than the SCs and STs was also carried. And this was, initiated in the year 2011. The rural ministry started this caste census. How? The government officials were sent door to door to gather the caste information as well as the socio and economic, conditions of the people. This data was gathered in the year 2000. So if I talk about, as we discussed, that caste census, the data from rural India as well as urban India is gathered. So if I talk about, the caste census or the caste census of 2011, it has three components. One is the rural census under the Ministry of Rural Development. Urban census, second component under this one, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. And then the caste census, overall the implementation is seen by the Ministry of Home Affairs. It has three components, right? So please remember that when it comes to caste census, the rural ministry, the urban development ministry as well as home ministry is involved. So this point is very important for your prelims. A good question can be asked for prelims from this particular point, right? Now, one thing that you need to remember is that when the socio-economic caste census was undertaken in the year 2011, right? So, which all information was gathered? Caste, one is caste and second one is socio-economic conditions. This census was undertaken in the year 2011. In the year 2016, only the SECC data was published. Only the socio-economic condition or that data was published, but the data about caste was not published. Why? Because the government said that the data is inaccurate. Right? In the year 2016, only the socio-economic data was published, but the caste data was not published, as happened in the year 1941. Right? Now, the question is, do we need to hold or undertake caste census? Is something that we need to understand. Now, the proponents or the ones who support caste census, they say that caste census is very, very important to evaluate the 50% reservation ceiling. Now, we discussed the fact that in the year 1992, the Supreme Court said that reservation beyond 50% is unconstitutional. What is this judgment of Supreme Court in the year 1992? Was it backed by logic, rational, or was it arbitrary? The experts say that only once we undertake a caste census, we can evaluate the Supreme Court judgment of 1992. As of now, we cannot. Why? Because we do not have data. Only once we have data, we can evaluate the Supreme Court judgment of 1992. Whether this 50% barrier should be removed or should be allowed to continue. The second need for caste census is the quantification of caste data for socio-economic assessment. Now, how do we identify which castes need government help? Right? To understand or identify the castes who need government help, we need to have a caste census. Only once we have caste census, we'll be in a position to understand the development levels of different castes and thereby frame policies for the upliftment of that particular caste or castes. Right? Now, for example, let me give the example of Bihar. See, the example of Bihar is given. See, now please understand this fact, it's very, very important. Roughly, in our country, the OBCs constitute 45% of the population, roughly. The SCs, they constitute 20%. The STs, they constitute, around 10% of the population. This is population. So, what is the number? 45, 55, 65, 75. So, 75% of our population either belongs to OBC, SC or ST. Then you can also add the vulnerable sections like women, children. The number goes up. Which means, let's say for 85%, or if we add women and children as well, for 85% of the population, we are giving 50% reservation. That's what Supreme Court said in the year 1992. Reservation cannot exceed 50%. So, is it justified that for 85%, 50% is sufficient? For example, in Bihar, the backward classes constitute 63% of population in Bihar. 63% population, right? The backward classes constitute this many percentage. For that, reservation is 27%. For OBCs, we have 27% reservation. The Bihar government says that this reservation is not adequate to the population of backward classes. That's the reason we need to increase the reservation from 27%. how do we identify this 63% population, or how do we identify the people who really need or really are in need of government help? We can understand only once we undertake caste census. That's the reason quantification of caste data is very, very important. The third one is to promote inclusive growth. What is inclusive growth? See, India is the third or fourth richest country in the world. I'm talking about world. Going by the GDP numbers. But is India really a rich country? Going by the GDP numbers, yes. But going by the purchasing power parity index, the number is abysmal. The number is very bad. The purchasing power capacity of people on an average is poor. You can find the data from internet. So if you see that there's a stark inequality in our country. Stark inequality. Why? Because 10% of the population, they hold country's wealth up to 70%, which means 10% of our Indians are holding 70% of our country's wealth. This is the stark inequality of our country. So as India is growing, but not each and every section is growing. This is a problem. That's the reason we say that in our country there is stark inequality. So the purpose of caste census is to promote inclusive growth, which means only once we have the caste census, caste data, we can identify that particular caste. The government will help them so that these people rise up the economic ladder. It promotes inclusive growth, caste census. Enhancing political representation, right? So if the number of different castes, or let's say backward classes, are more in number, then the representation in the parliament, in the state assembly, in the local elections, local body will also increase, right? So it also leads to enhanced political representation. Let's say, for example, if there's a person from a particular caste in parliament, that representative will take decision for the benefit or for the growth of his community. In theory, in practice, we know what all happens. Reducing religious polarization. We see religious polarization in our country. People, during elections, people ask votes in the name of religion. Religious, or people divide, the politicians divide people in the name of religion. This is political polarization, division. But if we focus on caste census, here the focus will shift from religion to social and economic condition, which means the focus will shift to the social issues, economic issues. Now, these are some genuine issues that the politician should focus on, the citizens should focus on. So, this will reduce religious division. Then, responding to public demand. Democracy. What is democracy? What people demand, the politicians have to give that demand to people. So, this is a call, clarion call from people, that people want that there should be a caste census to identify the most backward classes so that the government helps these communities. I hope you understood the need for conducting a caste census. Now, let's talk about the legal and judicial consideration. What the Supreme Court said, especially the Patna High Court or Supreme Court in the year 2017 said that the emphasis should be on adequate representation and not proportional representation. Not, what do you mean by adequate representation? For example, let's say the SCs constitute 20% of our population. So if you are giving representation or reservation same as the population, that is proportional representation, right? And adequate representation is, the Supreme Court said that we need to ensure that there is a decent number of the scheduled castes in the, let's say, education institutions, government jobs. This is adequate representation, which means it shouldn't be the case that the SCs are 20%, but in the education institutions their representation is only 2%. No, this is not adequate representation. At least the representation should be 10 to 15%. This is what the Supreme Court said. Then data requirement for reservation changes. Now, if you want to make changes in the reservation, we need data. As of now, we do not have updated data. So here the focus has to be on updated data, the recent data, so that we can make changes in the reservation policy. The third, limits on caste-based quotas. The legal experts have said that just by focusing on caste, we cannot increase reservation, which means the data on caste should be backed by the socio-economic data. Only once we have caste and the socio-economic data, we'll be in a position to identify the most backward classes who deserve government benefits, right? The next, what are the issues with caste-based census? Politicization of caste. We understood the need of caste census, but we also need to understand the issues. One is politicization, which means now the focus will be more and more on caste. As used to happen in our country that elections are mostly elections are held in the name of religion and caste. Now the focus will be more and more on caste. What is the issue? The issue is that caste based politics will dictate Indian politics. This is happening even now or post independence. This is what we see in our country, but the caste consciousness will increase further if we have caste census, as well as we can also have caste based violence, because every caste will start demanding reservation based on the data. Maybe they can back the demand with justification as well as without justification. Of course the government will decide, but there will be a demand from every community. They'll ask the government to give us reservation. There will be no end to this, and to win the elections the government will be forced to give reservation. Reinforcement of caste identities. See, this is my personal opinion that because of reservation, see, we have reservation since independence. This is my personal opinion, right? You can agree with my personal opinion as well as you can be against my personal opinion. How is this my personal opinion? Let me be very clear. This is my opinion that because of reservation, the caste consciousness is increasing. See, you should be proud of the fact that you are an Indian, but you should not be proud of the fact that you belong to a particular religion or you belong to a particular caste. It's okay to be a member of a religion or a particular caste, but your religion and caste should not define your identity. My personal opinion. Because of reservation, the focus is more and more on caste. So the caste-based consciousness, people are getting more and more conscious about their caste, because of which they have developed a certain tendency, certain hatred, certain negative opinion about other castes. This is not good for our society. So reservation should be, there should be a reservation based on the economic condition. If a person is poor, he should be given reservation. This is my opinion. As I told you, increased demand for reservation. So there will be more and more demand for reservation. At the same time, I hope you all know that the caste structure in our country is very, very complex. So the methodological challenge that we might face during caste census will be that the officials will find it very, very difficult to list the caste and the subcaste. So in the caste census, the caste is noted down, the subcaste is also noted down. Many people do not know the subcaste. The caste structure is very, very complicated. That's the reason this is another methodological challenge that we might face during caste census. I hope you have understood this particular topic. Right, students? Let us discuss a question now. Critically evaluate the need for caste-based census in India and discuss the challenges it presents in terms of data collection, policy formulation and social impact. Very, very wonderful question. So again, if you understand the question, I'm pretty sure you'll be in a position to write the answer. I request you to write the answer based on your understanding. Post it, then you can, note down the answer from the DNA notes, right? You can refer to the DNA notes to understand, or the DNA notes will help you to understand the points that you missed. But I want you to think and write. So I'll just give a framework of how to write an answer. In the introduction, mention about the caste-based service in our country, the historical background before independence as well as after independence, and the growing demand of caste census in our country. The next, need for caste-based census. Why is it that the people of a country are demanding caste census? Right, the 50% Supreme Court, revaluation, quantification of caste data, inclusive growth. You can mention all these points which we already have discussed. Then you can mention the challenges, politicization, increasing polarization, caste based violence, etc., etc., right? And then you can also mention the fact that Supreme Court, please mention the Supreme Court judgment of the year 1992, the Indira Sahni judgment. Also mention the recent demands, especially from states like Bihar, right? So you can also mention this particular area. And finally, in the conclusion, you need to balance your answer, right? No doubt, again, you cannot be completely in support of caste census, but the focus has to be on evidence, right? So the point is, the caste census could provide valuable insights, right? So once we have caste data, we'll have insights about the caste whose social and economic condition can be understood only post having the data. But again, in the conclusion, balance your answer by mentioning that there are certain challenges, right? And then leave the ball in the court of the people who will take the decision. That is the government, of course. This is how you frame the answer.
Now moving on to second article, which is related to DRDO. DRDO carries out maiden test of long range cruise missile. What all we need to know? What is a cruise missile? What is this particular long range cruise missile, which is a variant of Nirbhay missile? This much if you know, that is enough. And this is important for prelims as well as mains. Mostly in prelims they may ask any question on such topics. I'll give you one example. This is the previous year question of 2014, which which reference to sorry with reference to, this is incorrect, it is with reference to Agni 4 missile, which of the following statements is or are correct? It is surface to surface missile fueled by liquid propellant, can deliver 1 ton nuclear warhead about 7500 kilometer away, right? Now you may say that this is a very tough question. It is not at all tough. Simply, it is asking about some facts related to Agni 4, and that was in news at that time point of that time period. Then it was asked in the exam. So when this particular missile is in news, you can expect that such question can easily be asked. Okay. Now, what is the context? DRDO has launched this missile. Who is DRDO? Defense Research Development Organization. Now, this test is called as maiden flight test, maiden test. See, whenever you are making any missile or satellite or anything, there are different stages through which tests are conducted. Initially, what you do is at local level, wherever you are building that missile or what, you go for simulation testing. You just try to check and in a simulated manner. That means in reality, there is no missile taking place. In computer, you will check, let's say. After that, you go for maiden test flight. So here what happens is that you are actually sending that particular missile for the first time. You are testing it, right? So this has happened for the first time, you can say, and name of the missile is long range land attack cruise missile. It is a variant of Nirbhay cruise missile. All you will understand. Let's go with the basics. First of all, this term cruise missile, what do we mean by that? See, there are usually two types of missiles. One is called as ballistic missile, another one is called as cruise missile. Just know the basic difference. Simply, if you have, let's say, ballistic missile, ballistic missile. What will happen? You're sending the missile from this place and you want to attack on this place, let's say. So from India, let's say you want to attack a place in China, just for the example we are saying. Okay, what is a missile? Normally it's something that can go from one place to another, and there will be a system through which you can attack at a particular location in a very precise manner. So if you tell missile go there, it will go there, don't worry, with a weapon obviously. Now when it goes with a trajectory which is called as ballistic trajectory, what happens is that you will take one rocket missile. In that rocket you will have fuel and all through which this rocket will go. It will go only till this location, half of the distance. Okay, and its fuel will be completely exhausted. Just like in our bikes, fuel gets exhausted, the bike will not move ahead. But the remaining 50% of the distance it will automatically carry out because of gravity, right? So here you are sending, after that remaining part of the journey will be carried out by this missile automatically. Now they are following a parabolic path or ballistic path. That's why we call it ballistic missile. Okay, this can cover a very long distance. Very long distance can be covered, right? Now there is another missile which we call as cruise missile. Now this missile, let's say from one place to another, let's say from India's Rajasthan, you are sending one missile to some area in Pakistan, let's say to Karachi. So if you send a missile from here directly in this manner, no parabolic path, nothing, from a very lower level, very near to the surface. So if it is very near to the surface, it will directly go. So here you need continuous fuel, no gravity, nothing will work here. Work means it will not be required for the journey to complete. The fuel is required continuously, so the distance will be relatively lesser as compared to ballistic missiles. Ballistic one can cover a very long distance. This will be relatively less. But if you see in cruise missiles, they are going from a very low level or very near to the surface. When it is moving from very low area, it is very difficult for the radar systems to detect such missiles. So if you send such a missile, there is a very less chance that the other country will know that we have sent such a missile. So these cruise missiles are very, very interesting. So first of all, they are guided missiles. Guided means we guide them. We can tell them where to go, where not to go. A guided missile is one which if you send, let's say it has started moving, let's say this is the missile, we sent it, we have to go here. In the middle, if you tell him that don't go here, go here, it can change its path and go this side. That means here from our local level we can operate this missile. This is called as guided missile. We can give guidance to the missile. Second, it flies at low altitudes, which you understand. Third, it uses jet engine. In terms of that ballistic missile, there is rocket engine, and when it comes to cruise missile, there is jet engine. And it is very harder to detect and intercept such missiles. Okay, this is the basic. Now, when you look at cruise missiles or any missile, you can categorize in different terms also. For example, if you look at the speed of this missile, the speed with which it is going, you can tell of which category this missile is on the basis of its speed. Now, usually we categorize it in terms of speed of sound. See, whatever I am speaking, that sound is going there. There is a speed of sound. And we are comparing the speed of missile with respect to speed of sound. If it is equal to the speed of sound, exactly same as speed of sound, then such missile will be called as transonic or simply sonic. You can use this term sonic, transonic. And if it is lesser, let's say the speed of my missile is lesser than the speed of sound, that means the sound will go first, later on the missile will come. That is called as subsonic missile. Okay, and one whose speed is higher than the speed of sound, that means missile will come and hit me first than the sound of that missile, right? Such are called as supersonic and hypersonic missiles. This is the basic. Now there is a numbering we give. We use this Mach number. So whenever we are comparing the speed of this missile divided by speed of the sound, and we calculate the Mach number. So when the Mach number is 1, then we say that the speed of sound and the speed of missile is same. That is transonic. If it is less, then it is subsonic. When the Mach number is more than 1, it is called supersonic. And if it is more than Mach 5, if it is more than 5, it is called hypersonic. You cannot even imagine what kind of missile it will be. That means missile will hit, you will not even know, sound will come after a point of time, right? So this is the basic categorization of cruise missiles. Clear? Now there are many cruise missiles, out of which one is named as Nirbhay missile by the DRDO. Okay, there are many cruise missiles. Now this is famous. This is famous because it is a long range cruise missile. Usually the range of this cruise missile is relatively less, I said, but still it has a very long range, and it is all weather missile. In any weather you can send this missile, there won't be any problem. And it is indigenous. That means India has developed Nirbhay missile system. We have not imported from any other country. And it is subsonic cruise missile. Again, go back to this image. We said if the speed of that missile is lesser than the speed of sound, it is called subsonic. So Nirbhay is subsonic cruise missile developed by DRDO. It can carry both kinds of warheads. See, in that missile you can put anything. If you want to put a normal bomb, you can put it. If you want to put, let's say, nuclear bomb, you can put that here. That is possible. And it has got stealth features. Stealth features means the other party, that is the other country, will not be in a position to detect your missile. This is called stealth features. So for example, they said this term is usually used in newspapers, terrain hugging capability. That means it will go from a very near position from the surface. That means this is the surface, let's say, from here this missile will go. So hardly anyone would be in a position to actually detect it. That's the speciality of Nirbhay missile system. Now, Nirbhay missile, when we developed it, we wanted that we want to make the precision better. We want to be very precise. We want to make it more advanced. So we brought different variants of it. So one of that variant is this recent one that is called long range land attack cruise missile. This is one of the variant of Nirbhay missile. Its range is around 1000 kilometers. That means you can attack till 1000 kilometers. The accuracy has been increased. It has mobile launch capability. Mobile means what will happen? It's not like you have to launch from this location only. You can launch from anywhere. Right now you have the system available with you. Using a truck or some vehicle, you can go to this location, and from here also you can launch this particular missile. This is not possible with every missile. So mobile launching capability. Then there is standoff capability. Standoff means you can put this missile system in such a way or with a safe distance that the other party will not attack it. Let's say you are launching missiles from here, and here is Pakistani people. They too know that you are attacking. So Pakistan may send their aircrafts, or let's say in any plane, which will try to attack on your missile system altogether. That may happen. So in case of this particular cruise missile, it has standoff capability. That means from wherever it will be launched, that will not be exposed to the other side. So it is very good again, and it is many a times compared with United States of America's Tomahawk. It's very famous. So overall we are trying to say that this is a major achievement for India and DRDO to build this long range land attack cruise missile. I hope it is completely clear. Okay. Now look at this the practice question. Consider the following statements regarding long range land attack cruise missile recently tested by DRDO. It is an enhanced variant of Nirbhay missile with 1000 km of range. Absolutely correct, right? Unlike ballistic missiles, this follows a parabolic trajectory and uses a rocket engine. Well, it doesn't use rocket engine, it uses jet engine, we said, and it doesn't follow parabolic path. Ballistic missiles follow parabolic path, it doesn't follow. So the second statement becomes completely wrong. Third, it has mobile launch capability, which makes it suitable for deployment in diverse terrains. Yes, we said this is possible. And this LRLACM provides India with a standoff capability, allowing strikes from a safe distance without exposing the launch platform to counter attacks. That is also correct. So only the second statement is wrong. So 134B is the right answer.
Dimensions. Now moving forward, a very important article for the prelims examination, that is nothing but domestic systemically important banks. Why are these banks too big to fail? Okay. So first, as usual, let's understand the concept. So here we'll be discussing about DSIPs, Tier 1 capital and Basel 3 standards. It's okay even if you're not understanding anything here. This particular topic becomes very important for your prelims examination under current events of national and international importance, and also under economy GS paper 3 economic growth. Okay. So what do you mean by DSIPs? DSIPs are nothing but, as you say, they are domestic systemically important banks. Okay, so these are such significant part of the financial system that any kind of failure that these DSIBs actually, DSIB is nothing but these are banks. Okay, for example, in RBI, you have State Bank of India, you have ICICI, you have HDFC, all these are domestic systemically important banks. Okay, so how are these actually determined? That is based on their interconnectedness about the global transaction, the amount of assets it actually has, the amount of capital requirements it actually has, amount of loans it actually gives. Based on certain criteria, certain banks are classified as DSIBs. Okay. So these are so much significant in nature in the financial system that in case one DSIBs actually fail, what happens? It's going to cause disruption in the economy. So that is why these DSIBs have actually been established. So when did it come into existence? It came into existence after the 2008 financial crisis. Okay. So this concept of DSIBs was actually established by this particular FSB. We'll actually talk about this Financial Stability Board. It is an international organization that actually thought there is essentiality or there is requirement for the establishment of DSIBs. Okay, so this is what we are going to discuss in this particular article. So here RBI has actually listed few of the banks as DSIBs. So this is what we will see. Before that, we will see if we've actually gotten any kind of comments in our article. I mean, in our session, let's see for any kind of comments or questions. Okay, so far nothing. Okay, so here we've discussed about DSIBs, right? So we will move forward understanding this particular concept. So previous year there was actually a question on Basel norms. Basel norms are nothing but it is an international standard of the capital requirement that the bank needs. Okay, what do you mean by capital requirement? See, every bank has certain assets. Okay, assets are it can be either the reserves that the bank has, it can be the shares that the bank has. So what happens when an economic crisis comes or when the bank is in the verge of failure? How it will fail? Because the customer is not able to pay back the loan. So when it's in the verge of failure, they can use this capital requirement, that is that asset, so that it fetches some immediate monetary, or you can say immediate money or some kind of relief. For example, if I have shares, if the bank has shares, it can immediately sell it and get money in order to handle that economic crisis for that particular time. So how much of capital requirement a bank can have, that was actually set up by this Basel 1 and the Basel 3 norm. So we'll discuss about that as well. So there was a question on Basel 3 Accord, or simply Basel, often seen in news, is related to which of the following. Okay. Now moving forward, this is actually the particular news. The Reserve Bank of India has retained State Bank of India, HDFC and ICICI as domestic systemically important banks. So here you need to know what are the DSIPs in India. So these banks are the DSIPs in India. So what are DSIPs? I told you these are banks of such significance to the financial system that in case of failure, that will cause substantial disruption. And these banks are too big to fail banks because of their size, the complexity of operations, the cross-border activities as well as the interconnectedness. This particular concept, I told you, originated after 2008 financial crisis, after Financial Stability Board, that is the FSB, established the framework of global systemically important banks in 2011. This FSB is nothing but this Financial Stability Board. It is an international organization. This actually monitors as well as gives recommendations on the global financial activity as well as the global financial system. Okay, so this is it. And what else to say, it was actually established under the aegis of G20, and whether India is an active member of it or not, yes, India is a part of it. Very, very important. Now moving forward, let us actually see on similar lines of that globally important banks. RBI also released a framework in 2014 where the domestic banks will be classified as the DSIPs. Okay, so here domestically RBI has actually come up with that plan. So under what category or criteria that a bank is classified by the RBI as DSIPs? First one is that there is preliminary sampling. Okay, so we need to see the size of the bank, whether it is actually exceeding 2% of the national GDP. First one. Next one, it's systemic importance score. So there is a score which is actually based on several factors. Okay, what is the interconnectedness of a particular bank? For example, if I'm SBI, what is the international connection, or what is the connection of SBI towards various sectors in my domestic economy, so that this bank becomes very, very important for me. So one is interconnectedness. Next one is complexity and substitutability. That is, it should be such a huge indispensable bank that it cannot be substituted, and also the complex institutions that provide irreplaceable financial services. So this is one of a kind. Now moving forward, next one, what happens is, after the RBI actually does the sampling and everything, there is something called composite scoring as well as bucketing. Okay, so once the banks are assigned their scores, they are kept under different buckets, like bucket, high buckets as well as low buckets. The banks that actually score higher are kept under higher higher buckets, and these actually have stringent capital requirements. This is what I told you. What do you mean by these capital requirements? The amount of assets. What do you mean by capital? A capital is nothing but the assets, the revenue, the shares, the loans, etc. This is what the banks will have, right? So they must have a particular amount of assets with them, so that in case of any economic turmoil, they must be able to sell off this asset and actually produce money. Okay, so that is what it is. And the banks with higher scores, for example, SBI actually has a higher score, so they actually have to maintain a higher proportion of the stringent, capital requirements. So this is what it is saying. So let us keep this aside for now. Let me talk about, in the capital itself, there's something called as the tier 1 capital. What do you mean by tier 1 capital? It is a core capital of a bank. What do you mean by that? I told you, right? A bank has a lot of assets, it has loans, it has reserves, and then it has shares, etc. What happens is, this tier 1 capital is the most important one. It is a primary financial buffer, and this actually absorbs losses during the time of economic losses. And according to Basel III, this tier 1 capital has two components. One is CET1, that is Common Equity Tier 1. Here it is the highest quality of the capital and it can absorb losses. That is, I will immediately sell this capital, make money, and I will actually compensate or offset the economic problem that I am actually facing. So this can include common shares and then retained earnings, disclosed reserves, etc. Next one, apart from the common equity tier, is the additional tier 1, that is AT1. It comprises perpetual instruments. Perpetual instruments are nothing but this keeps generating money throughout, okay? So there is no maturity period, and this includes non-cumulative preferences shares and certain bonds. So see, here you need to know about what are shares and all these economic terms which are actually used here, okay? Next one, we will move forward. So under Basel III, the requirement, Basel III requirements, bank must maintain. We saw that CET, right? That equity tier 1. So that has to be 4.5, that is minimum of risk weighted assets, okay? The asset, how much of asset it can hold against the risks, that is called as risk weighted assets. It has to be 4.5 and minimum tier 1 CET plus 1 plus the AT1. This ratio is actually 6% of the risk weighted assets, okay? So here this is just a formula, not very important for you to understand. So now this, having understood what is it, now we need to know what is Basel. I told you it is an international banking regulation which was actually set by the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision, which is headquartered in Basel, which is located in Switzerland. Basel I actually came out in 1988. This was the first international standard for bank capital requirements, and the latest one is Basel III, 2010 to 2011. It got developed in the response or in the backdrop of the 2008 financial crisis, okay? So this is what it is. Let us quickly see what it is. So as I told you, I'm not going to solve it for you guys. I'm just going to say that this particular MCQ has been taken based on the article that we have discussed here. So you need to submit your responses and solve it immediately after the session using the link that actually will lead you to the website in order to get your detailed evaluation.
I'm talking about Manipur specifically. I'm talking about AFSPA as an act. Now, those who think that whether this act is very important or it's an average act, I'll say it's one of the most important acts for you to study. See, this topic is important for prelims as well as mains, specifically as part of internal security. Here you can look at this previous year question to understand the importance of this topic. Human rights activists constantly highlight the fact that the Armed Forces Special Powers Act 1958, that is AFSPA in short, is a draconian act leading to cases of human rights abuses by security forces. What sections of AFSPA are opposed by the activists? Critically evaluate the requirements with reference to the view held by Apex Court or Supreme Court simply. So they are asking about your view, the Supreme Court's view, asking you to actually critically evaluate whether we should have such a law called AFSPA or we should remove this particular act. Somewhat this mechanism has to be understood in detail. Now, let's go in detail to understand what's actually happening. What is the recent news? Central government has recently reimposed AFSPA in some areas of Manipur. Now, these areas include 6 police station areas of Manipur. Now, this is being reimposed. That means it was earlier imposed. So, if you look at entire Northeast, most of the areas of Northeast, already we had AFSPA being implemented over there. But with time, government tried to remove or withdraw this AFSPA implementation. So, if you look at the year 2022-2023, in this time period, we actually removed this AFSPA provision or the AFSPA being implemented in Manipur. But what happened after this, after 2022-2023, especially in this year, what happened? We saw a big crisis in Manipur and the situation is not at all stable. And in this particular act, AFSPA, the area is declared as disturbed area. When it is disturbed area, when it is declared as disturbed area, then you can send your military and that military will have immense power under this particular act. So we are talking about armed forces who are going to get special powers. Now understand the history of it, how this act actually came into picture. So if you go back to history in the times of British era, we saw that Indian freedom struggle, which continued for a very long time, it included many movements against British Raj. So earlier we heard about non-cooperation movement. After that we heard about civil disobedience movement. But the last movement was Quit India movement. Now this movement is very important because after this there is no movement. After that, Britain had to leave India simply, and we got the independence. But if you look at this movement, at that point of time, the scenario was very much chaotic. There was chaos. So anyone was attacking anyone. More or less, we are saying that Indians were attacking Britishers. So if you look at the government system, it was more or less simply similar to what is happening to Manipur right now. It seems very much chaotic, unstable. Similar was the case over here at the time of Quit India movement. So at that time, the British government decided to bring an ordinance through which they gave some extra powers to their armed forces, that is their military. And this military or armed forces were supposed to control this region. They have to ensure peace and stability in this region. So they needed special powers. Why? They could do anything. For example, they want to arrest someone without any warrant, they can do that. They want to fire and kill anyone, they can do that. Such extra special powers were given under this ordinance. Now, what happened after independence? Although Indians were of the view that will not have such draconian law after independence in India. But you see, after independence, we faced some problems. First, we saw the partition in the Kashmir region, or what we call as the Pakistan, formation of Pakistan. Then, after that, we saw insurgency in the region of Northeast. The term insurgency simply means that there are people who do not agree with this political system we have, and they have gone for a rebellion. They have become rebel. They are not ready to accept your system. They want their sovereignty, or they are not ready to accept the government system or the system of India. They are saying, we don't want to stay with you. So such insurgent groups started developing. So in the form of some militias, some kind of, you can even call some of them as terrorist organizations. And this started happening specifically in the northeastern part of India, that is this region. So here, to bring some stability in northeast, to ensure that this region remains peaceful, Government of India in the year 1958 introduced this act called Armed Forces Special Powers Act. It is very similar to what the ordinance was brought in by British government at that point of time earlier, right? Now under this particular act, the implementation of this act is done by Ministry of Home Affairs, and under this, armed forces will be given some special powers. Now, this is implemented, but in this act, you will declare some area as disturbed, and there you can implement this AFSPA. So these areas can differ. So let's say today government has decided to bring this region into AFSPA. Tomorrow they can withdraw also. They can decide later on this region will be under AFSPA. So you see, earlier even Assam, which was earlier this act was being implemented over there. Even in Punjab, it was being implemented for some point of time. But later on, it was removed from Punjab. It was in Tripura also, but later on it was removed from Tripura. So these things keep on happening. Now the point is, currently this AFSPA is in enforcement or is being implemented in Assam, Manipur, Arunachal Pradesh and Nagaland, 4 states of India. Now what exactly happens? What are the key provisions mentioned specifically under AFSPA? First of all, you're going to declare an area as disturbed area, and we want this disturbed area to become peaceful. But which area will be called as disturbed area? Well, the area where the normal civilian government is not in a position to handle the situation. And to handle the situation, the police cannot handle it. That's why we need military. We need military. Maybe there are some terrorists, maybe the people are not listening, whatever is the situation. The police cannot handle, so we need armed forces. And here, who can declare this area as disturbed area? There are 3 authorities. One is our central government, another one is the governor of a state, or third is the administrator of a union territory. All of these can declare any area as disturbed area in India. After that, this AFSPA will come into picture. Now, there is section 4 of this AFSPA which gives special powers to armed forces. First power, that they can search without warrant. Any army personnel can go in this region and search. They can come to your home also and they search without any warrant. Then they can destroy any particular property on their own. Let's say they think that there's a terrorist sitting over here, there's a person who can cause chaos in the society, so they can go ahead and put grenades or use their forces to destroy the property. Then they can arrest you without any warrant. They will detain you. Now after the arrest, they have to give it to the local police station, but at least they can arrest. That's a big thing. Then they can even open fire. Now this is the toughest thing to look at. That means an army personnel can directly shoot and kill any person if they want to, and then they will be protected from any prosecution in future. So in future, if you go ahead and try to sue, file a case against this army officer, nothing is going to happen, because Armed Forces Special Powers Act gives them this power to even kill anybody. Now you please understand, why do we need such a law? The reason is, we want stability. Stability is the first thing that government or the system needs to ensure. After stability, all other things will come into picture. So this is the act. Now there are many people who argue that AFSPA should be there in India, but there are some people who say it should not be there. So let's understand their arguments. First, those who support it. They say that the security challenge in India that exists, that is very much important for us to deal with. So when you're dealing with terrorist or insurgent groups, you need to ensure that armed forces have these powers. If they will be having fear in their mind that in future someone will file a case against them, how can they operate freely in that region? How can they operate or function smoothly in that region? So to ensure security of the region, we need such law. Then when a conflict zone is there, you have to, your first priority is to bring peace in that area, and you need to empower, that means give extra power to the armed forces. There were police also, they could not handle it, that's why you went for the military. So definitely you need additional power to be given to them. Then they will act without fear because of the legal protection. And last point is, there is constitutional validity. See, this act was even said by Supreme Court that it is a valid act, it is actually required. So interestingly, this is the case. Naga People's Movement for Human Rights versus Union of India 1998. In this case, Supreme Court first of all said that it is constitutionally correct. Why? Because it is the state's prior responsibility to ensure stability. So they can go ahead with such act also. Apart from that, Supreme Court came up with some guidelines. They said that it doesn't mean that we have this law, so any military official will do whatever he or she wants to. No, there will be some regulation. So first of all, when you are declaring any area as disturbed area, this will not be for an indefinite period. See, some area of Manipur right now has been declared as disturbed area, but this does not mean that you will put Manipur in this disturbed area category for next 10 years, 50 years, 30 years. No, it will not happen. It will not go ahead for infinite time period. Rather, you have to, that means government has to review this issue periodically. They have to review AFSPA periodically. After few time, after few months or few years, they have to recheck. Then second thing, they have to use minimal force possible. See, don't go for using military force very high in number, because when you use such number of military force, then many other people will die. Even civilians might die. This can create more chaos in terms of that crisis increasing again. So use minimal forces. And then whenever central government is declaring any area as disturbed area, they should try to consult the state government also. All these are guidelines given by Supreme Court to the central government. Clear? Now, there are some people who argue against Armed Forces Special Powers Act. They say, first of all, what about states' autonomy? You see, if you look at Schedule 7 of the Constitution, there are union list, state list, concurrent list. Now, if you look at state list, which shows that what power is there with the state governments or the state legislature, executive, etc. So you will see law and order is part of this state list. But even after that, suddenly central government can declare an area as disturbed area and get into this area. So where is the autonomy or the power of state governments? And center many a times does not even consult state governments. They directly enter into it. They directly declare one area as disturbed area. So there is some conflict between state and center also, right? Then second is excessive use of force. We talked about this, that when we use more force which is not even required, then there will be civilian casualties. And in case because of a military personnel, if a normal civilian is died, then the situation which was already very chaotic, that further becomes more chaotic. The issue further escalates. That's why we want to ensure that it should not be there. This is the argument. Then what about our fundamental rights? In India, we have fundamental rights. So if you look at Article 21, it says right to life and personal liberty. So when you are bringing such AFSPA, you are detaining anyone on your choice, you are killing anyone on your choice. What about the right to life of that person? Then when you detain someone, when you arrest someone, what about the freedom of movement, which is under Article 19? So these fundamental rights are violated. This is why we should not have AFSPA. That is the argument. Then what about accountability? An armed force personnel, what about his accountability? If he is killing anybody or doing whatever act, then who is going to bring them to accountability? That is a question. Look at these issues from the perspective of human right violations. See, there was a report brought by Hegde Commission, and they have provided one document through which they tried to substantiate or give evidence of killings done by military personnel. These are called extrajudicial killings, and they tried to show that because of Armed Forces Special Powers Act, which gives extra power or special immunity to armed forces, they are many of the officers are misusing this power. So this was shown by this report. And even the last argument is, what about international law? Because this act completely violates international law. For example, this Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which gives priority to human rights, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. So this law goes against it. So these people will say we should not have this particular act, right? Now there are some recommendations given by some committees. We need to know that. First, this committee called Jeevan Reddy Committee of year 2004. They clearly said that this is not a good law at all. We should directly repeal Armed Forces Special Powers Act. Now what we can do additionally is that some provisions of AFSPA can be added or integrated into another law. This law is UAPA, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act 1967. So if we bring into it, then we can completely remove Armed Forces Special Powers Act. That was one of the solutions. Other thing is, we should bring in grievance redressal mechanism. Let's say due to an army person, something wrong happened with a civilian. Then that civilian or an innocent person should have a grievance redressal mechanism. That means they can come to the government with their grievances or their problems, and government can sort it out. Such mechanism should be there, right? Then we have second ARC, that is Administrative Reforms Commission, which in 2007 said that we should completely remove Armed Forces Special Powers Act. We should not have such act in India at all. Rather, India should go for more humane approach. So they are directly recommending we should not have any such provision. Don't even add it in UAPA as such. And the third one, which is Santosh Hegde Commission, they said that we should review this AFSPA every 6 months. So if you have applied it in a region, then check it whether it is applicable in a right way or not. And entire AFSPA and its provisions should also be reviewed again and again. And we need to ensure accountability of these officers. And we should have a transparent mechanism through which we can understand what is exactly happening in that region. So this is said by Santosh Hegde Commission. Now overall, if we have to say what should be our view, first thing is that fundamental rights, human rights are very important. So certainly that should be protected, and to protect that, whatever is required we should do. But removing AFSPA completely will not solve the entire issue, because we know that we are vulnerable. There will be some issues, there will be some conflicts which we have to solve, and ensuring the basic stability is the job of the government. So they require such act through which they can come up with some extra powers. So we might require such powers, but only in the case of emergency. It should not be used again and again. So the role of judiciary can become important to put a check on the executive action. And yes, certainly it should be reviewed again and again. It should be ensured that the people over there are completely accountable towards the larger public. So these are the things we need to actually do. Clear? So now the time to check whether we have understood it or not. So look at this question. The reimposition of AFSPA in the parts of Manipur highlights the ongoing debate over balancing national security with the protection of civil liberties. Critically discuss the need for AFSPA in addressing security challenges in the disturbed areas and examine the arguments for and against its application with reference to judicial, administrative and civil recommendations for reforming the act. So overall, they are expecting you to show what are the security challenges specifically and give some advice. Show the analysis, the arguments which are which support AFSPA, which are against AFSPA. All that you have to show. So when you start with the answer in the introduction, give a brief introduction about Armed Forces Special Powers Act, or you can talk about the current context related to Manipur. Then show them what is the need of AFSPA, because we have some security challenges. Those you can mention. Then mention why people are arguing against it. Those human right violations, states autonomy, etc. Then provide the information or recommendation given by some committees. And after that, you can put conclusion and give your view how you can solve this entire issue with a balanced approach by reforming AFSPA and by bringing accountability and transparency. This is how you write the entire answer. Okay.